So let's segue into competitive gaming and what that means for games in general. Because I know, Matt, you were talking about some of the higher tier strategies that get unlocked. So, and I think this is kind of perfect because Ethan was coming in. No offense, probably coming in at like a very low level to an RTS game, not the most complex strategies for grunt rushes and that kind of thing. Like the easiest thing you can do, and you can approach it at a higher level. And I think a lot of games do this. I think any RTS almost, like especially in the StarCraft vein, they gear themselves so hard towards these, and certainly Dota or League, they gear themselves so much towards this competitive community. Do you think that's a good idea?
Absolutely.
Does that make the game better or worse?
I think it makes it more enjoyable for all parties as long as it's not being made exclusively for one or the other. If League, I think, is a good example of this because they do have the bot games. They have a matchmaking system, and they do a lot of balancing changes. But it's never been to say, hey, this is just for professional players. It's going to completely screw the new guys that don't get the I won't say basic strategies, but the things you learn you cannot do absolutely. Like you can't take on 4 people. Well, you might be able to if you're Katarina, but but the professional players are able to innovate and create new metas for the game, if you will, and new fun ways to play these champions that never would have been thought before.
See, I agree. Well, okay. I agree and I don't agree. Because I do see that. Because I love watching competitive, Dota and League. It's fun. However, and while I do think the competitive gamers can explore new strategies and change the meta or whatever, my problem is for your pub player, for the 99% player, I don't mean that in like an economic context, but for the pub player, the scrub, who just wants to play and have fun, he doesn't have access to any of that. He's got to play by the book. If you're in a low to mid-level play, let's say, of League, if you don't do exactly what you go in with this set strategy because somebody on some website told you to do it, you get to do, if it's StarCraft, it's the 13 pool or whatever it is now, that kind of thing. You have these set strategies that you have to follow to the T, and you don't actually get any of that mind game, that meta. That's where the real fun of the game comes out, but the game restricts it to you have to be really good before you get into any of that.
That's true. But I think you're restricting it to absolutely entry-level players. Entry-level players aren't going to be able to beat all these upper-level players. Entry-level players should be able to do whatever they want against another entry-level player that hasn't played before. They should be able to both execute their own strategies, and it really will come down to, I don't want to say random choice, but if neither of them know what they're doing, and some person starts cranking out air units, and one guy, only spits out these guys that can attack ground because he thinks they look cool, and this guy thought the others look cool, of course that guy's going to wipe the floor with them. But, in a more realistic context, if somebody looks up a guide online, another guy's going to look up a guide online. If the player is serious about wanting to win and getting to a point where he can play with his units, instead of having to follow, you must build, a spawning pool at this point, and 2 Marines and some odd, Zerglings later, you have to build a Hydralisk in if they're playing Rude War. If you're serious about learning, you will find counter strategies either on your own or you'll explore and scour, for your own, for somebody else's, how they deal with it. And you'll learn on that and execute your own. I guess that takes you out of the casual player context because there's always going to be some strategies that are better than the others. But if you really are a casual gamer, I don't think you're going to care if you get your, wiped by a 4 pool every time,
I think you will because it's not fun.
It's not fun to lose, let me tell you, but if you care about winning, you'll go put forth a little effort, and maybe you're less of a casual gamer. You're evolving.
But a little effort is what you do. It is the I'm learning some set strategy, but that's not dynamic. That's not fun.
It's not dynamic.
Because that's not fun.
A casual gamer is probably never in a detailed game as like StarCraft will say, and I don't know about Dota if that's, there are certain tips and things you'll learn about that to become a professional. But there's, to be able to play like that against, and even professional players against the same professional skill level aren't able to play with the meta as much as they want to. And sure, it's not much as fun, but you know what else is fun? Winning $1 million.
No, absolutely. But I'm saying that shows a weakness in the game design, in my opinion. A game should always be dynamic. It should always be different every time you play.
And I think it might be, and everybody's just afraid to explore that.
Yeah, I guess when the stakes are that high. So I mean, I'm sure that's part of it. I know, Ethan, you've played Halo competitively, so you can speak to more of like the the non-strategy game aspect of things.
Definitely. When I would go to tournaments and play in tournaments, it was interesting for me to segue from the real-time strategy competitive. During I would play the first-person shooters, specifically Halo, competitively, but then there was the times they would always have StarCraft at a lot of these. And so when they were doing the StarCraft, I had nothing better to do than to watch them. And it was just so complex to me, so over my head that even watching them, I had a hard time keeping up. Even I couldn't understand what I was even seeing, let alone trying to command that. Obviously, there's also a jump between console and PC there, but yeah, so that's part of it. But when it comes to the competitive aspect of a first-person shooter, especially one as straightforward as the Halo and the earlier Halos, I think it's easy to start out with. I don't think there is a heavy learning curve for a first-person shooter, one as simple as Halo.
Right.
You can just pick up the sticks. Sure, I think the main obstacle is learning the map. If you're going to play well, learning the map is the first thing you're going to get over. And you can either, as a casual gamer, there's a limited number of maps and you'll just pick them up as you play, or if you're a more dedicated gamer, you can go and learn them. And then part of learning a map competitively is then learning item drops and learning spawns and times.
Sure.
And the different angles. But then at the same time, if you are a casual gamer and you enter a room with a clan, you are going to lose.
Absolutely. Even
if you're a fairly talented single casual gamer, and that's not fun to get spawn killed all the time. Sure. I remember Halo 2 was really bad at that. You could be completely locked down on Sanctuary. They could be on top of every tower, and they could control all the snipes, and they could just count to 3, 1, 2, 3, pull the trigger, and you would die because they could force you into a single spawn.
So what about the reductive nature of competitive game? Because so often it takes a game with potentially some nuance there, like maybe a Halo, and it reduces it to, on this map you have to do this to win. You have to stand here, get up on these boxes, get this weapon, and get your headshots or whatever it is.
Yeah. There's definitely that case with holding these certain spots and having these power weapons or having these power ups. Worse than that, I would say, is the editing of the rules. I mean, I was always a firm believer of, if I can do it in the game, it should be allowed. And so then that introduces ideas of out of bounds. I remember that was one that I always struggled with. There's out of bounds locations on a map. If you were playing in a tournament, you could not go to these places, and people would get to these places by totem poling. And it's and in my opinion, I'm all for that. I say, hey, if you have the teamwork and the cohesiveness to literally stack 4 guys on top of each other while you're all jumping and crouching before the other team comes in and gets a team kill,
right? Good
job, man. You deserve that high spot on the perch. But no, they would say these parts are out of bounds, and then they would limit your speed, or they'd increase your speed so that you could do different jumps and different things more easily. And to me, that just is you're playing a different game. You're playing almost a modded version of the game at this point. That didn't sit well with me. I remember playing clan matches for Halo 2 and Halo 1. What they would do to try to prevent the host advantage was they would actually put in a third team, like a referee, and the referee would be the host. And what this guy would do at the beginning of the level is he'd either go to one of the out-of-bounds places, or he would just go to somewhere that, for instance, in Halo 2, everybody's map, if everybody remembers, the competitive map was Lockout. I believe that's the name of it. It was the one. It was blue, snowy. There was the Suicide Elbow. There was Battle Rifle Tower. There was Gravlift. There was Underglass, and there was the Sniper Tower. Well, there was also a Shotgun Alley, but in competitive clan games, nobody went there. It wasn't technically out of bounds, but no one ever went there, and you weren't expected to go there. You weren't really ever down there. It was all, we're going to hold Battle Rifle, we're going to hold Sniper. Anyone who goes up Suicide Elbow is going to die, and you might be able to try to push a little bit from Glass. You might every now and then be able to get something going from the Gravlift, but you were never in this shotgun tunnel. So what they did was they thought, I mean, that was, but it wasn't off limits, it wasn't out of bounds. And so they took this trend of gameplay and they used it and they said, that's where the referee's going to hide. So the referee is now on top of the shotgun. And it was like, and Halo 2 shotgun was absolutely terrible compared to any other Halo shotgun. But the point being, you were never down there. I remember my first clan match, I didn't know that. So I ran down there and I saw the guy crouching there. I just killed him. And so then that like threw off the whole thing, and I was like, oh, so now I have to limit myself to what I'm doing in my game while I'm playing the game. I have to set a different set of rules than what the game engine is setting on me.
So you're saying you don't like that there's these fake rules kind of imposed. What if the game was designed with those rules in mind, though? Like, that was part of the game. Every time you played Halo, it had these rules, these out of bounds and stuff like that. Would that make it a better game or a worse game?
I would find it more acceptable that way. I mean, I would prefer them, to answer your question, yes, I would prefer that than the other. But I would still like them not to cater towards that way. I would like either, at minimal, the options of, hey, for you competitive gamers, here's your box with no, skins or anything on it, and with, more damage and faster paced stuff, and no power weapons. And for you casual gamers, here's the way we initially designed it.
That's always been kind of an issue with me too, especially because in computer first-person shooters, I don't think this is as much of an issue anymore, but way back in the day, like the Quake 1 through Counter-Strike days, it was definitely a thing where you tried to milk all the frame rate you could get out of your game. So you would go into your graphics options, turn everything all the way down. Sometimes you download replacement models that were just little blocks kind of a thing. And because you got a competitive advantage doing that way. You got a better frame rate, you had a better response time. It always bothered me just because, and maybe this is like flowery of me to say, but I think like there's a certain like artistic value to the game. Like, I don't know. I don't like playing a game how the creator didn't intend it to be played. Like the whole experience are these different graphics and things.
That's why I dislike the MLG rules in Halo 3 and how they started to impose those and they made their own MLG playlist. And to me, it's these people, they thought that the developer didn't know what they were doing when they made a competitive game, and maybe they didn't want to make a competitive game, but to make this competitive, we're going to say this, and this. We're going to, as you said, we're going to lower the shields, we're going to up the damage, we're going to take these weapons off the map.
So they actually changed like core gameplay rules?
Yes.
Really?
So the shields wouldn't regen as fast, you would wait longer.
You can jump higher, you can run faster. But what was nice about 3 is they acknowledged that and they put that functionality into the game. They said you can make game types now, and then that way you can make a game type that's more competitive. Back in the day, it was you would join a room, or like the tournament would say in the title, like, no rockets, meaning you were not allowed to go grab rockets during the game, and if you did, that could be game loss. That could be.
And I'll say when we did that my clan was playing Modern Warfare 2, we did some game battles stuff, and they had you could set this, but we ended up losing a game because we forgot to set the score limit lower, and we hit the score limit first, and it wasn't even close. We destroyed this other team, but we still had a loss on game battles because they reported it that we didn't set it up correctly.
Right.
And it sucks when that happens. So.
Sure, yes.
But on another aspect is some of my best, funnest times playing games were in these tournaments, even though the tournaments were set up with these MLG rules, the stakes are so much higher. The adrenaline was pumping through me so much more, and there's just something about if you are into that that feeling when you're playing, then it's almost worth the. And it's also nice to know what the expectations are going in.
Sure.
And so that's where MLG is standardize it. I don't think that having MLG standards is necessarily the right answer. I should be able to just say, well, the default game standards are the game standards, and whatever I can do based on the default game is what I need to prepare and practice for. But as long as they set those standards beforehand, then you get to practice. It's quite enjoyable for me as a competitive gamer.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've been playing. I play a lot of Counter-Strike. I've been playing that for 15 some years, however long. But I always played it in a pub capacity, just joining a public room with 32, 64 people or some such. And now with the newest Counter-Strike, they've had more of a pro gamer in mind, so you can do these 5-on-5 kind of clan rule matches, and it is a totally different game. Like it's the same. You use the same core rules, maybe a little more. There's friendly fire, and that's not necessarily what you'll find in a lot of pub matches. But aside from that, it's like the same core rules of Counter-Strike, but just that whole pro gamer atmosphere, like certain guns that you see all the time in pub matches, nobody uses them, and that kind of thing. And it's definitely it's fun in its own way. As much as I was kind of crapping on StarCraft 2 in League, I can understand it is fun in its own way. I prefer a more dynamic game, which I think you get in a more casual game. Casual because the skill ceiling's lower. It's good and bad. Skill ceiling's lower. There's less places to go and explore with your gameplay, less possibilities net. But it's more possibilities for the average gamer, the pub guy, the 99% guy who's just coming in, wants to play a game for a couple hours, is not going to master it, but wants to do some cool stuff too. Wants to be dynamic and potentially win. So I think that's sort of like the give and take of it all. But I can totally understand, because League of Legends obviously has a huge fan base. So I am not the prevailing opinion on this.
I think to counter your point slightly, I would say it's definitely much more frustrating as a pub gamer to come in and have such a strict learning curve because the game is geared towards pro gaming, and so then all the competitive gamers are just sitting there spawn killing and everything. On the other hand, it can also be fairly unenjoyable if you're a very competitive gamer, and then those first, in Halo, the matchmaking system, you go into an entry-level game to play just to slaughter a team. It didn't do anything for me. I don't find that enjoyable. I don't find winning so enjoyable that it was fun to just play against people who don't know how to play.
I think that would put you in the minority, though. I think there are a lot of people who got plenty of kicks doing just that thing.
Yeah, I do remember people would make new accounts so that they could just...
Smurfing
is
League of Legends. That's the entire point of that.
Smurfing happens. I think it happens in every game. Anywhere there's a ladder, there is a Smurf.
I guess I'm not so self-delusional.
Yeah, I mean,
I understand that I'm only beating these people because.
As an aside, that's my biggest complaint about League of Legends and Dota is I feel every time I play, and again I'm at really low levels of play. If I win, we stomp them, and it's not that fun because we just stomped them. And if I lose, I'm the one who got stomped, and that's super not fun because I just got stomped. I don't feel like there's a lot of I know Matt plays this a lot more than I do, and you I'm sure you've had a lot of really good matches, but and I have too. But not that many. I feel most of the time it's a heavy victory or a heavy loss, and there's not that competitive down to the last last minute base race or whatever.
And I can't. If you're talking about Dota, I can't speak for that.
Sure.
But I know that League at least tries. I don't know how effective this is to make certain champions are stronger at certain points in time than others. Mm. And so it's not perfect. I know there's if a champion that does really well early. Gets really far ahead, then yeah, you're probably going to lose. But I think knowing that you could do that as well is also pretty exciting.
Sure.